Today I'm going to show you how to make one of these lovely cornucopia baskets. They're really easy to make, they don't take very long, they don't take a lot of material to make them, they're really versatile. You can use them as a nesting station or as a bird feeder, you can put seeds in there. You can also use them if you do gardening. You can put them on top of your cane supports to avoid accidents poking your eyes. You could put little LED candles in there. You could have them just on their own, or you could have a line of them to create like bunting. They're really sweet. They look impressive. They're easy to do. I've taught these for years and years, and I always tell everybody by the time you've made 3 or 4, you're an expert. So even if you struggle with your first 1 or 2, they don't take very long. So by the time you've made 3 or 4, you should be pretty good. Traditionally, this corn dolly weave, you would use wheat. Got some lovely Maris squidgeon here. But it works equally well with woody material. So I'm going to show you how to weave with willow. I've chosen an English basketry variety of willow called Black Maul, spelt M-A-U-L. Its Latin name is Salix triandra, if you want to look it up. But you can use any woody material, it just needs to be flexible. So you could use dogwoods, cornice, you could use brambles. Investigate the materials that are readily available to you. All I would say is if you're collecting from the wild, make sure that you've got the landowner's permission, and never take too much. Don't strip from the same plant. In order for these to work the best way that they can, you want material to be the same as each other. So I'll just take this nesting material out of this one. In its essence, this is a square. We've got 4 sides, 4 equal lengths. Because we're weaving, although technically I think this is actually braiding or plaiting rather than weaving, we need a 5th rod. So we've got 4 rods, and then we've got a 5th one, number 5, because that will lock the rods in as we weave around. You need 5 as a minimum, which will create a square. You can use more rods than that if you wanted to. So you could do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, as many as you like. I tend to find once you've moved away from the 4, from the 5, they become more and more circular. Once you've mastered this technique, we're going to make something that's quite small. You can make them larger. You can add material if you want to make the structure bigger. We're going to weave so that the material's coming in, making it this lovely spiral shape. You can have it coming up so it stays the same distance from each other all the way up, or you can even come out and come back in again. There's loads of different applications for this. So once you've mastered making these simple little ones, if you wanted to, you can make lots and lots of different designs from the same pattern. The only materials that you really need is a decent pair of secateurs. You don't have to spend a lot of money on secateurs. These only cost about £15. These are pointy, these are called snips. These are curved, these are called bypass secateurs. So long as they're sharp, they'll do the job. I've also got a ruler and a pen or a pencil so that I can mark out the board. This time I've used a cardboard box, which I've covered in tape just to make it a little bit stronger. When I do them with classes, when I've got lots of people, I have these little wooden boards. So it's quite forgiving. You can use whatever you like. It just needs to be strong enough so that when you put your material through, it's got a little bit of stability with it. I've got some string. So I've done 2 different handles. I've done a string handle, which is the easiest, and I've done a willow woven handle. So if you want to do the string handle, have some string. And I've got a knitting needle. I needed something a little bit pointier to start off with than the willow. That's all you really need to get going. I hope you really enjoy the tutorial. Do let me know how you get on, and good luck. To start my weave, I've got my little box and I've drawn a square. The size I've used for this cornucopia is 8 centimetres by 8 centimetres. You can do it a little bit larger if you like, but I wouldn't recommend going smaller for the first one. Make sure your lines are nice and straight, and then once you've marked it, use a knitting needle or something pointy to make 4 holes in the 4 corners of the box. I've got my 5 willow rods together at the tip so that they're exactly the same at the tip, and then any excess from the thick end, from the butt end, I've cut pointy with my secateurs. This makes it easier to put them through the holes. They weren't strong enough to go in on their own, so I've used a knitting needle just to place that first hole. It made them much easier to go in. The box is deliberately slightly deep so that when I take the structure off at the end, I can still do some weaving with the thick end, which will be important when you get to the end of the structure. So I'm adding 4 rods into each of the corners of my square, and then importantly, the 5th rod is going to go close to one of the corners. It doesn't matter which corner it goes next to. This 5th rod will be the first rod that I start the structure with. I'll bend it against the box and it will go in front of the opposing rod. Once that rod is laid down, the rod that it's just gone in front of is the rod that I weave with next, and that just goes over to the rod next to it. The rod that it's just gone next to then goes over the next rod, and so on until you complete a square. Once your square is completed, you will use the rod that you've just gone in front of, you will lift it straight up, creating a nice strong crease, and then use that rod to go in front of the next. It's important that it always goes on the inside of the structure, otherwise when you do your next weave you won't actually be locking the rods in place with each other. Go nice and slow, there's no rush. If you want to get good results, lift the rod that you're weaving with straight up so you get a good crease. Hold the rod that's already gone down in front of it in place so it doesn't slip as you weave, and then push the rod down in front of the next rod. You'll keep repeating this pattern, which will give you a square and a lovely spiral weave as you go. You want to try and aim to keep a square shape as you go, but as you go, the hole at the top, which is actually the bottom of the structure, will become smaller as you go. As I was weaving with my rods, I was concerned as I got towards the end that I wouldn't have enough length of the rods left to close the gap, so I deliberately started to bring the weave a little bit longer, so the gaps is not quite as buttressed up to the rod that it went in front of. You can see in the video as I get towards the end that I've deliberately let the gap be a little bit bigger between weaves. Once the hole's filled, you can finish the weave off, but I always like to have a tail at the bottom of mine, and I really like that rope effect at the bottom of my structure. If you're not used to doing this cornucopia weave, it can feel like you're doing a different weave, but it's exactly the same. Each rod that you're weaving with is effectively going over 2 rods. It's going over the rod that's just gone down and over the rod that's going to be the next rod that you weave with. You can carry on weaving with your rods as long as you like. If you want to finish at any time, just do a couple of weaves to hold it in place. I've carried on weaving this structure to get as much out of the material as possible. Once I was happy with the shape and the size, I've lifted the rods up and used one of the rods, it doesn't matter which one, to wrap around the other 4. I started slightly higher up from the weave and then wrapped downwards back towards the weave, just for 2 or 3 wraps. With the rest of my tip, I then did a couple of weaves through holes that were naturally occurring in the structure, close to where I'd finished off. and that held the whole structure in place. The last thing to do is to take the cornucopia off the box. I've given it a good wriggle to get it off, and you'll notice that the 5th rod isn't woven into place. I like to use as much of the material as possible, so any rods that were left over, I've continued the weave at the other end of the structure. And then when I'm happy with how it looks, I'll use one of those rods to weave in the same gap as one of the other rods. So you'll have 4 rods creating a square, and then you'll have the 5th one coming out next to one of the others. I've trimmed them so that they're all neat and the same as each other. I think it looks more professional and gives a better finish. And that's it, that's your first cornucopia weave. You can leave it as it is. If you want to add a handle, I'm using some hemp string, and I'm simply tying a double knot on one end, getting the correct length that I want, and then tying a double knot on the other end. If I'm working with children, we usually end up doing it this way. It's easier than using a willow rod for the handle. To use a willow rod, I've inserted the thick end, or the butt end, on one side, and then gone all the way over to the tip and inserted it at the other side. This way I can keep a nice big arch on my structure, and that makes it less likely to kink. It'll always want to be really straight at the thick end, so once it's in, I've given it a gentle massage just so it has a nice curve on the other end as well. And then when I've got the desired height of the handle, I've woven the rod back through so that the tip and the butt are in the same area. You can finish it off however you like, you just need to do a few weaves close together. I've done a simple diagonal cross, pulling it nice and tight as I go along just to make sure it's strong. Once I'm happy with how it looks and it's not going to come undone, I've then given it a final trim. And that's it, that's your first cornucopia weave. If you struggle with your first one, don't worry, it's only taken 5 rods. Practice makes perfect, and it's easy enough to make another one. I really hope you enjoy making these as much as I've enjoyed making the video. Do let me know how you get on.